I wouldn't have to get up in the night and check fires. Now I can just go to sleep and sleep peaceful and not worry about burning the community down. And just what a wonderful way that timed and worked out. And about 3 a.m, I heard and I thought, oh, that doesn't sound good. It sounded like the Kansas City Royals were having batting practice against the side of my house. And out of nowhere, a storm blew up. And we had tennis ball size hail, baseball size hail for 30 minutes. We were screaming. You couldn't even hear each other in the house. It was breaking our windows. What do? Do you make a run for it? Yeah, I'll go outside and get your head knocked off. And what do you hunker down? And it's a helpless feeling. I've grown up in Tornado Alley all my life because I lived in Oklahoma before they get to Kansas. I've seen tornado damage my whole life, and the scariness of it. I'd never seen hail that big for 30 minutes. And I was scared what might be behind it, a tornado. The damage that it did was just unbelievable. We've spent this year, our roof, our windows, our siding, our paint, our vehicles. I took the vehicles. There was so much storm damage. They had a drive-through place in Independence, and Gary helped me, and I took both the vehicles down there, and the weatherman apologized. There was nothing on the satellite. It just came out of nowhere, this little storm. And I said, on a scale of 1 to 10, how bad are my cars? He said, they're the worst we've seen today. Whoa, man. I'm just like, wonderful, and storms happen. It's where we live. It is where we live. And it has taken us a year probably to get a lot of those things taken care of. And the other night a storm blew up and it hailed for 30 minutes again. But it was pea size. And I walked out on the porch and I thought, are you kidding me? You gotta be kidding me. And you think about these things and they happen. They happen in life, and a lot of it is just out of our control. And then there's nothing about the storms of life that come our way. And then on Christmas Eve, which, what happens with Christmas Eve in a thunderstorm? It's supposed to be snowing. And I go out, and my barn is in the middle of the road. My insurance man says, are you calling me again? I said, it's not my fault. I don't know what the Lord is trying to do or what the weather is trying to do. It's a crazy time. Storms, they come in and out of our lives, and we think that the Lord doesn't understand. Yes, He does. When you look in Luke chapter 8, verse 22 and following, one day Jesus says to His disciples, let's go over to the other side of the lake. So they got into a boat and set out. And as they sailed, He fell asleep. It's always nice to fall asleep after the storm. But it's pretty difficult with all that hail beating the side of my house to go lay down and think I'm just going to sleep through it. Now I know there's some of you in here crazy like that. That no matter what's doing, you just sleep through it. I know some of you are out here. I'm not one of those people. My adrenaline level's up, and I'm not going to be able to calm down for a while when stuff like that's happening. That's just the way I am. And Jesus went and fell asleep. A squall came down on the lake so that the boat was being swamped. And you know what that means is, this boat is slapping the waves and going up and slapping the waves. And you've seen one of those oceans where the water's coming over the deck. And he's sleeping. These guys are starting to get like me, like, wow, this is getting crazy. You're going to have to tie yourself down to a post or it's going to sweep you off the deck. They were in great danger, they thought. The disciples woke Him saying, Master, Master, we're going to drown. Do you understand? There's a storm going on and you're just sleeping? He got up. He rebuked the wind and the raging waters. And the storm subsided and all was calm. Man, I wished I could do that. I wished I could have just went out and said, hail, stop. Tornado, hold on a second. Just go on about your business. Wouldn't that be awesome to be able to do that? I know people are spending billions of dollars to try to figure out how to do it. He got up and rebuked the wind, and all was calm, and he says, where is your faith? In fear and amazement, they ask one another, who is this, that he commands even the winds and the water, and they obey him? I mean, you could follow Jesus, and you could go into the work of following him around and being a disciple, but there were still things that he was capable of doing that struck amazement in your heart, even though you're following him. That still happens to us today in a lot of ways, of things that God does that amaze us, even though we're following him, and we love doing that. Every once in a while he does something that just truly amazes us. And that's what we love about him. And in this situation, they look at themselves, I know he's an awesome guy, you know he's an awesome guy, but wow, that was crazy. He just looked at the wind and said, stop. He just looked at the waves and said, calm down. And it just quit at the sound of his voice. And they said, who is this? You look in Matthew chapter 8. Interesting, they're both in chapter 8. Verse 23 says, then he got up from the boat with his disciples who had followed him. Without warning, a furious storm came upon the lake, so that the waves were swept over the boat, but Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him, saying, Lord, save us. We're going to drown. He replied, you of little faith, why are you so afraid? And then he got up and rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. And men were amazed and asked, what kind of man is this? Even the winds and the waves, they obey his voice. Man, wouldn't it be awesome to be able to go through life and be able to approach things with that kind of strength? Man, that would be incredible for us to have faith and believe, and we should. I know we think if I become a Christian and I follow God, we're just going to sail through calm seas all the way to death. It's not that way. I got up in the middle of the night, thought it was going to be a calm night, and a storm rose up out of nowhere. And even the weatherman said the next morning, I watched it, and he said, listen, man, it just caught us off guard. It came out of nowhere. That rarely happens. Life just isn't that way. It's not always going to be calm. It's not going to always be easy. And Jesus said to approach this, be fearless. He looks at those men and said, listen, what are you afraid of? There's nothing here that's going to hurt you. Be fearless. Number one, I put on my outline, why are we so afraid? But once in a while, I have people ask me, why is life filled with trouble for Christians? I had the opportunity to coach with a good friend of mine in the Panhandle. It was a neat opportunity because through all this, he became a Christian. We coached together, and it seemed like after Steve became a Christian, his life was just nothing but one turmoil moment after another. Sometimes when we'd go to practice, he'd look at me and say, Mike, when you preached about becoming a Christian, I actually thought that when I gave my life to Jesus Christ that things would go better for me. And he said, I'm just going to be honest with you, it's been really tough in my life since I have become a Christian. I guess I was expecting something smoother, something calmer, instead of the storms that have come upon my life. And I said, Steve, I wished I had an answer. I don't know why in some people's lives, when they come to Jesus Christ, that things can get pretty rocky, that the devil can lead an all-out attack upon your life. And I have no answer for that. And that bothers me when that happens. But it goes back to the scripture to where Jesus never promised us that everything would be smooth sailing if we became a Christian. In fact, when you look in a lot of his teachings, he said, if you're going to follow me, remember when people hate you, they hated me first. So Jesus was warning us that it wasn't going to be smooth sailing to be a Christian. And maybe it is the soft sell in our world of people selling books and making things to make Christianity be out something that it isn't. Because there's moments it can be really tough. One of my friends just became the sheriff of Stratford County, Texas, and we were just talking the other night. He called me and we were talking about this, and his life the same way. When he became a Christian, when I was in the Panhandle, we would talk out working cattle. He said, man, you know, since I become a Christian, my life, Mike, he said, I have to be honest with you, there's days I think about going back and not being a Christian, that my life was a lot smoother. But it seems like ever since I've given my life to Jesus Christ, I've had trouble in my family, trouble in my marriage, trouble in my work, trouble with my friends. He said, it's just been really hard on me. Then these storms are beating against me and they hurt. And I said, Ted, I wished I had an answer for you, but all I know what to say is to not be afraid and to be fearless and to love the Lord, and that whether you're going through these storms or not, He's still a great God. I could go out and say, Lord, why the vehicles? Why the house? Why the windows? I did go check on the animals are resilient. They always make you think you're crazy because I'm all jacked up. And Cindy goes, where are you going? And our property looked like it had snowed. All golf ball, tennis ball, baseball size hail. As far as you could see, it covered the pastures. It was the craziest thing I ever saw. And I thought, I'm going to go up and check on the horses. And they were just standing there looking at me. What's up with this, Mike? They were just fine. It's amazing how animals are so resilient when we're so freaked out. You know, just another bad night. We're out of here every night, Mike. You're in the house, under the covers, and I wished I could look at people and say, when you become a Christian, you're going to get rich. You're going to have lots of friends that you never had before. You'll never have any trouble. No illnesses will ever come into your life. It just will be the most awesome thing you ever did. And for every guy that ever preached that to anybody, they ought to be slapped upside the head. Because it's not true. Christian people have storms come into their life just like everybody else. It's how we respond to the things that happen in our lives that make the difference. It reassures me that this isn't our home. That God has something better for me. Not this house, not this land, not these animals, not these things. They're all going to pass away. He has something more enjoyable for us that's beyond our wildest dreams. And if we don't focus on that, and if we focus on the earthly, I think that's where we get confused in our thinking. You have to be kingdom-minded and be thinking about heaven and heavenly things instead of earthly things, or you'll be confused about this world and what you think God ought to do for you. I don't deserve anything that I have. In fact, the sin in my life, I deserve death. But God has chosen to forgive me so that I can go to heaven. Outside of that, I should quit worrying and be fearless. It's hard to tell people that who are not Christians very long. Wow. 2 Timothy chapter 1 verse 7 says, "For God did not give us a spirit of timidity, fear, but He gave us a spirit of power, of love, and self-discipline." In the face of the storms that we face in life, He wanted us to be fearless. I'm from a football town like Fredonia, And I grew up in a barbershop listening to stories my whole life, because you know the men that go in an old-timey barbershop, wow, it's deep in there. Cows may come and cows may go, but the stories in here go on forever. That's what's written on the wall, you know. And they always talk about this guy who played football there. He wasn't real good, but he kept going out every year, this Mike Pogue. And these really good players would just abuse him. And one of the stories they share is they had a really, really good running back that just leveled this guy. And he would always do things on the team that would astound everybody. He would jump up and his helmet was twisted sideways, blood coming out of his face. He would run up to the running back and go, "You're okay. I didn't hurt you, did I?" Because everybody in the town just loved this guy. He wasn't a very good athlete, but everybody loved his attitude about life. You know, that you just couldn't hurt him. You could try to hurt him, but you couldn't hurt him. And they would know he had to be hurting, and they would just grin and walk away. And a Christian has to be fearless like that in the storms of life that we face, that we've got to look the devil in the eye and say, "You can't do anything to me that you think is going to hurt me, because I'm going to heaven. And I'm fearless in spite of all the things that you do. You're not going to take that away from me." We need to approach life more that way. Wow. But I believe there's probably people here today that think, where is Jesus in the storms of my life? Where is he? Is he sleeping? Why is he sleeping when there's so much trouble going on in my life? He's not sleeping. He wants you to be fearless. He says, don't be afraid. Believe. When you look at that story, he says, "You guys, where's your faith? Haven't I been teaching you what you ought to know, and yet you come to me?" You should be looking at the storm saying, "It doesn't matter what goes on here, because we got Jesus with us. We're fearless. You can't do anything to us. I know it looks bad, but we're getting through this." Why can't we approach things that way? Why do we automatically think, this is it, boy, it's bad? Not that way. When you look in also chapter 8, when Jesus was at Jairus' house, if you turn over here to verse 40, when Jesus returned, a crowd welcomed him, for they were all expecting him. And then a man named Jairus, a ruler of the synagogue, came and fell at Jesus' feet, pleading with him to come to his house, because his only daughter, a girl about 12, was dying. As Jesus was on his way, the crowds almost crushed him. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years, but no one could heal her. She came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak, and immediately her bleeding stopped. "Who touched me?" Jesus asked. And when they all denied it, Peter said, "Master, the people are crowding and pressing against you." But Jesus said, "Someone touched me, and I want to know who it is." When the woman, seeing that she could not go unannounced, came trembling at his feet, in the presence of all the people, she told Jesus why she had touched him and how she had been instantly healed. And then he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace." And while Jesus was still speaking, someone came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue ruler. "Your daughter is dead," he said. "Don't bother the teacher anymore. He doesn't need to come to my house." And there's a part of Jesus that's hard for us to understand. When some of you, when things happen, you freak out. I've got a buddy that's a fireman, and he's so different to me, because if I see someone with a serious injury, my adrenaline level goes up, and I'm thinking somebody needs to do something quickly. Scott does this every night for a living. So he'll walk up to someone seriously injured going, "Yeah, we got a problem. Somebody ought to call the captain." I'm thinking, I'm screaming, "Yeah, we got a problem." You know, but he's just so calm in a storm, and people that do that all the time usually are. You don't want the freaked out people around, you want the calm people around. you know? And Jesus appeared to people sometimes to like, doesn't he even care? Doesn't he even care that my daughter is dying? He can just go about his business and, get to my house first and take care of the lady that touched you later. But Jesus had to, hey, I've got all this. Slow down, calm down, I've got this. But it's hard for us to understand him that way. Hearing this, Jesus said to Jairus, don't be afraid. Just believe. She'll be healed. He was probably scratching his head going, I know he's a great guy, but I'm not getting any of this. And I know he can calm storms and the wind and the waves obey his voice, but I'm having trouble understanding that right now because my daughter's not alive. When he arrived at the house of Jairus, he did not let anyone go in with him except Peter, John, and James, and the child's father and mother. Meanwhile, all the people were wailing and mourning for her. Jesus said, stop wailing. She is not dead, but asleep. Now they're all thinking, well, not only is he different, I think he's crazy. I know a dead person when I see one. They laughed at him, knowing that she was dead. But he took her by the hand and he said, my child, get up. Her spirit returned, and at once she stood up. And then Jesus told them to give her something to eat. Her parents were astonished, but he ordered them not to tell anyone what had happened. Wow. It's hard for us to trust Jesus like that, isn't it? It's hard for us to trust him with our lives to the place to where if I become a Christian, like Ted and Steve, Lord, are you going to take care of me? But my life is in turmoil. Who is it could take care of all this stuff in my life? Jesus can. And he wants you to be fearless about it. And he can't do it if you don't trust him. And he wants you to be fearless when all the storms of life that you face, and today a storm is headed this way. We live in Kansas. And Jesus said, just be fearless. I've got all this. And you say, well, I want to listen to him, and I want to be a Christian, and I want to follow Jesus Christ, but wow, the things that he's asking me to do. I'm a teenager in a high school where you're asking me to be a Christian, and the storms and the things that I face, Lord, you don't, yeah, he understands. And he wants you to be fearless. But Lord, you've never been to my workplace. You don't know. Yeah, he does. And he wants you to be fearless. That Jesus has this. He got up from the boat and he walked out and said, did he calm the storm first? No. He said, you guys, you have little faith. Don't you believe I'll take care of you? And he just stopped it. And it said, they said to them, I know I was a little kid growing up watching the Lone Ranger. They always said, who was that masked man? You ever, you know what I mean? That's what they were doing. They were like, it just stopped. When's the last time you went fishing in Kansas and there weren't waves? Very few calm nights where you can use a topwater lure. Very, very few calm nights in Kansas. None in the Panhandle. No water either. But that's what that water did when he said that. And they were fishermen. And fishermen have been on some pretty swampy seas. And they were scared. And Jesus said, I got this. Be fearless. Don't be afraid. When someone gives us bad news, whether it's our health, or whether it's our family, or whether it's our finances, whether it's our future, it's hard to be calm, isn't it? It's hard to just walk out of that meeting and say, you know what, that was a rough moment in there. But you know, God's got this. Because He told me He would. And that all sounds good, and that's what you're supposed to say. And there's moments to where I get in the vehicle and I say to Cindy, a minister's wife, I know I'm supposed to say this and I'm supposed to live this. Whew, Cindy, this is a rough moment. I'm just going to admit to you, even though I say all that stuff and I believe that stuff, this is a tough day for me. What are you going to do? I think I'm just going to break down and cry. You know what has always helped me over the years, though? And he's not here today, so I can say this, the little general. That's my father-in-law, Junior. When I would face difficult times as a young adult, being married to Cindy, it's interesting to go spend time with a farmer. Because see a guy lose hundreds of acres of crops in one night. And one time I said to Junior, you ever think about crying? Just looking at it and just like breaking down like, wow, we worked hard to do all that. And he said, yeah, you could. They didn't go fix it. What are you going to do? Going to go get on the tractor? Going to go disc it up and go to work and replant it? Because crying about it ain't going to fix it. I'll never forget that. Because there are moments in life where I say to myself, yeah, and what? That isn't going to fix it. It'd be better just to be fearless and think, there's a better way to handle this. Be fearless, he says. Wow, that's easily said. In Luke chapter 12, Jesus said in verse 32, do not be afraid, little flock, for your Father has been pleased to give you the kingdom. You are an heir to everything that God has. There's nothing here that you should be interested in. What you should be interested in is what God has for you, and to look forward to that. And to be fearless about things that happen here and look forward to what God has for you. He says, my Father has taken care of you. Don't you get it? If you're a Christian, in the face of all the storms that you face going on, I will take care of you. In the course of this next week, remind yourself of God's track record. I'd challenge every one of you. Remember when we went through the story? There is not a story in the Bible from cover to cover where God is not victorious. There's not one. Why do you think they were in there that way? So that you would believe in your heart that if He lives in you, you will be victorious when life's storms are thrown at you. Why would we read all that, believe all that, teach all that, sing all that, preach all of that, and in the middle of a storm not believe it? That's what Jesus wanted people to understand. This can happen for you too. Just be fearless. But it's so hard for us so many times to live it out. Turn to Matthew chapter 24 as we wind this down this morning. Matthew 24 is somewhat confusing at times because he's talking about the destruction of Jerusalem and he's also talking about the end times. But you look in verse 1 of Matthew chapter 24. Jesus left the temple and was walking away when his disciples came up to him to call his attention to its buildings. Do you see all these, he asked? I tell you the truth, not one stone will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down. As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately. Tell us, they said, when all this will happen, what will be the sign of the coming of the end of the age? And Jesus answered, watch out that no one deceives you, for many will come in my name, claiming I am the Christ, and will deceive many, and you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. But see to it that you are not afraid. I know that we live in a crazy, crazy, crazy world. They've been arguing about transgender bathrooms. And then, of all things, I read the Independence paper, and the guy that's transgender is Michael Hughes. I showed Dee that the other night at the meeting. I'm like, oh, come on, now everybody will think this is my family. Everybody knew something was wrong with us. I mean, we live in a crazy world of unrest. That's a true story. I know no one believes preachers, but it's there. Wow. I mean, you think about the economy, the national debt, the global warming, and I always think, yeah, it's going to get warm and a whole lot warmer. The battles in our streets. ISIS wants to kill every Christian. I mean, do you ever stop and think about that? I'm on their hit list. I'm a minister of Christianity. That means I'm a number one target to be killed by ISIS. Because I teach people to believe in Christianity. I would be one of the people they want to kill first. Same-sex marriages, the hatred of law enforcement, the protests in our streets, the crazy politics. Wow, we've got storms coming at us from every direction. And Jesus said, there's going to be wars and rumors of wars. In the end times, people are going to question their walk with Christ and walk away. I don't know if you follow a lot of the teaching about the end times, but what the teaching is, by the time Jesus gets here, there's going to be less of us than more. Because a lot of Christians, the storms of life are going to take such a toll upon them that they will walk away. There are many things in this world to cause people to not be fearless. But Jesus walked out in the middle of the storm. And he just calmed it. And people said, who is this guy? Well, I'll tell you who he is. If you're a Christian, he lives in your heart. And the same Jesus that calmed that storm wants you to approach the storms of life the same way. You're one of his disciples. And does he look at you and say, oh, Mike of little faith? Or does he say, hey, listen, trust in me? Man, as the praise team comes to lead our song, I want you to listen to this verse in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10. For we are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. And in the translation, what it means there is we are Christ's masterpiece. You are special to him. He wants to take care of you. He loves you just like he loved the men that were his disciples. And he wants you to be fearless in this world in which we live. And I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of things out there that can strike fear in our hearts. That storm that hit our place is just one thing. There's a lot of things a lot more frightening about personal health and family issues and finance issues, whatever they might be. And Jesus said, I want you to be able to just believe in me. What he was saying is this. When there's a giant storm facing your life, I want you to walk right out on the battlefield, and I want you to be a teenage boy picking up a smooth stone, stick it in a sling with a giant laughing at him. And he says to him, I'm going to kill you this afternoon. The giant laughed at him. Said, you guys have a whole army and you send me a boy? You send me a boy? And that boy looked at him and said, I'm going to kill you this afternoon. He didn't say if things go right, I will. He said, you've made fun of my God. You've laughed at the God that I represent. And because of that, in the face of this incredible giant storm, I will have no fear. And what happened? A hero was born. Because he believed in his heart that God was who he said he was. And that if he would stand up for God in the face of a giant or a storm, that he would be victorious if he showed no fear. Is that where you are? When there's a storm, do you panic? Or do you look for a smooth stone, put it in your sling, and say, listen, I'm going to remain fearless in the face of this giant storm facing our life. And God is going to work this out. Now, just like I told Steve, and just like I told Ted, I don't know when God's going to work in my life. I don't know how God's going to work in my life. I just know he will. The timing is all up to him. It's up for me to trust and believe and turn that over to him. I don't put a time limit on it. I just know God will. And you just have to believe that he will come through for you. This morning, have you quit believing? Have the storms beat you up to the place to where you don't even want to follow him? Has your love for him grown cold? Or are you stronger than you ever been? Or do you need to learn to be fearless in the face of a storm? I don't know where you are this morning, but if you need to make a decision, you're welcome to come forward as we stand and sing.